So you want to start with the letters?
Yep, I'll start with the audit report when you're ready.
We're ready.
Oh, okay. Alright, so inside your assembled book, I'm gonna focus on page 1 first. So, everything went pretty good with the audit. I mean, we had a little bit of delay here and there, and I'll go into some details on that here in a minute, but in the end, ended up with good numbers, everything looks materially correct. So we did go ahead and still issue the unmodified opinion following regulatory basis of accounting. You'll see that in that second, third paragraph here on page 1. Now, when you look at this report, you are going to see a change in formatting and how it's presented from last year, just because standards have changed on how we have to disclose some of that. So if you pull this up compared to last year, it's going to have a little bit more information in it, just because of what our requirements are now. But in the end, you're still going to focus for your audit, that paragraph there that says unmodified opinion on a regulatory basis of accounting. Just with you guys passing it the gap waiver every year, that's what you're focused on because that is your method of choice. Then below that, you'll see where we have the basis for the adverse opinion stating that we're not following GAAP, we're following regulatory basis, etc. It's just presented in a different order than what we're used to seeing in the past on that. And then as we go through, jump over to page 4 and 5. That's your main set of financial statements where we get the summary of what happened within each fund and the detailed funds behind it. So when I look at the totals on page 5, we're going to start with our beginning unencumbered cash.
On page 5 or page 4?
Page 5.
Okay.
On the totals. So we had total beginning unencumbered cash for the county of $6.9 million. We did cancel some encumbrances of $55,000. I'll go into that here in a few minutes. Brought in receipts of $9.8 million, expenditures of $9.4, ending unencumbered cash of $7.5. So we've increased our cash $518,000 throughout the year. Now, of that $518,000, a good portion of that is still sitting within your federal funds. $387,000 of that is as a result of your COVID-19 grants. And then we had about $76,000 increase in general fund, $45,000 in special capital improvement, which is part of that canceled encumbrance that I'll go over. And then the rest is just kind of within each fund. Those are your main areas that you increased your surplus. We had accounts payable of $372,000 at the end of the year. So if you add that back in, the end of the year was $7.8 in cash available. So overall, when you look at the total picture, you're still going in the right direction. We're still setting cash aside. We're not spending more than what we've got. We're maintaining our reserves. So things to keep in mind as we're working through the budget. So same thing with the footnotes. Not a ton of changes throughout the footnotes. Just a couple things that I wanted to point out. As usual, when you have a summary of your interfund transfers, that's on page 9. It's kind of a nice little chart to refer to. You can also go to your budget transfer schedule when we get budget drafts of the budget to you guys to look at. It'll report that same information.
These are all transfers that we did?
Yeah, between the funds. First one's the special motor vehicle that you're required to do by June 30th of every year, which I'm sure that's already done or been done in the process of being done.
So is that basically, is that but special motor vehicles, is that basically just for the sheriff's department and stuff like that?
No, the special motor vehicle is actually your motor vehicle tax collections.
Oh, okay.
So that stays in the fund for the treasurer's use throughout the year to operate the motor vehicle program. At the end of the year, the unencumbered cash, which this year it was, gotta get back to the right page. Special motor vehicle. Oh, there you go. We had an ending cash of $113,932 of unencumbered cash. So that balance will be transferred here at the end of June, if it hasn't been already. You might check with Lisa and Vanessa, because with everything else going on, so they don't forget about that stuff, to look at that, but I'm sure that's on Lisa's checklist to go over. So that'll get transferred to county general. Last year it was 114 that was transferred over as a result of that. And then that just becomes over for county use at that point. And the reason why that statute's written that way is just so we don't build up so much of a reserve in the special motor vehicle. It's got more than enough to operate the program. County can use those funds, so. And then the rest are just your normal operating transfers, putting things into reserves and things of that sort throughout the year, so. The other footnote that I kind of want to zero in on with you guys is on page 13. And it's at the top of the page. It's our stewardship, compliance, and accountability. Essentially, that's the area that we're going to disclose any issues with Kansas statutes that we encounter. So this year, I do have one statute violation that we're having to cite, and that's because we have a negative unencumbered cash in one of our distributable funds. It was the groundwater management district. Throughout the year, we had an issue of taxes being over-distributed to those districts. Mary had contacted me throughout the year and asked if that's okay to just, instead of calling the whole money back, to pull the funds back as more distributions came up. And I warned her, I was like, yes, that's fine, but you want to watch your end of the year, because if you create a negative cash, you're going to be in a cash violation on that. Because we focus on the balances at the end of the year. Well, it didn't come out quite to where it zeroed it out. The rest of that, I believe, was corrected in the January distribution that was held back from what they should have received to correct that. But we do have to cite that as a negative cash on there. Okay? All right, so beyond that, you have all your detailed financial statements for each individual fund. You guys see those reports on a regular basis, so I'm not going over in detail on a lot of them. A couple funds I do want to just point out. But page 29, that is your local alcohol liquor fund. So, and I give you guys this speech every year, we're not utilizing these funds at all. We're bringing money in, we're not spending it. These are funds that can be used for prevention, treatment, education, for anything dealing with substance abuse, whether it's alcohol, drugs,
We have
Things like that.
we have a fund there, we're getting ready to distribute that.
Is that the grace that
That's
we
the
were
grace
talking about?
fund, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that would qualify. I think that request was only $10,000, so keep that in mind. If you have other programs that are coming up, don't take it out of general. If it qualifies, I would look at using these funds first, because these funds can only be used on that, where general can cover anything.
Okay. I
So,
think we were planning on funding them $10,000 a year. And this will fund it for about 4 or 5 years before we end up running out of money.
yeah,
because
because you
of-
usually get about 3,000 in there,
Yeah.
so. Okay, perfect, so, got that.
And we could amend that if they need more
Yeah,
funding.
but then they'll run out of money quicker.
Yeah, they'll just,
Right, yeah, and then at that
Well,
point, then you would be looking at probably using county general funds to help supplement it, if we didn't have enough in that particular fund, so. The next one is on page 33, that's with your DARE fund, kind of goes along with special alcohol. Do we not have any school programs that we use? Does sheriff work with local law enforcement at all for the DARE program,
Nothing
or?
going on right now.
You used to have DARE, but I don't think we.
The SAFE program at one time.
Yeah.
So just wanted to point out, you have available funds for that purpose, so make sure you're running those expenses through here. I didn't come across any not spent or spent in another fund, but just want to always point that out to make sure that we're thinking about which funds are authorized to spend for certain.
Where does that
purposes.
DARE money come from? So it added, is that right, that it added $30?
Mhm. So-
Where did the 500 come from to begin with, and then where do they get money every year?
I'd have to go double check to see what that is, with it being coded miscellaneous. I want to say it's probably donations of some sort.
That's what I figured.
Could be a small grant of some sort, but usually I'm gonna see donations come through on that.
Mhm.
So, if the school is doing some sort of education program, or the officers, whether it be county sheriff, or the local, PDs in one of the other communities, that's what that can be used for.
the seatbelt safety that Chavez did, that was through the state? Or would that be funded through the county?
Probably through the state.
It's through the state, but at times they have their prize awards and things like that they put out. That could come through the county, I believe.
Okay.
So then the last fund that I wanted to kind of go over is Fund 30, page 37. That's our capital improvement fund, special capital improvement. This is the fund where we ended up having a canceled encumbrance, so that's why you're gonna see an increase in cash in that. We had a $55,000 canceled encumbrance. Somehow, and it, just with the dollar amount, we didn't catch it last year, and it's not material, so we're just fixing it in the current year. We had an encumbrance essentially double booked, okay? It was listed on the encumbrance listing of still needing to be paid, but the invoice must have came in prior to year end last year and was still paid at that point. So we had it booked as an accounts payable when we had already actually paid the cash out before year end. So we're just adding that back into the accounting, saying that that is no longer an outstanding debt with that, so.
Good.
And then one thing that Lisa had brought up with me when we get over to the budget discussion, she was saying that we might need to watch for setting some funds aside for improvements for the buildings, things of that. The special capital improvement fund is that reserve for that. That qualifies for construction of new property. We can go ahead and put repairs and maintenance through it. We cannot run equipment through it. Now HVAC might qualify if we need to do something along those lines, since it is truly building property, but we can't buy a road grader from this fund.
Okay.
Okay? So, but you always have the option with these types of funds. We can reverse a transfer if we decide the funds are no longer needed in this fund. Most of these funds, actually I think within this fund, I'd have to go back through the history, it probably came from the oil and gas reserve fund when we closed that. But we don't have the oil and gas reserve fund open any longer. We could do a reverse fund, put it back in the general. You can then transfer it to another fund to where you want to spend it from, okay? We just have to make sure that we have the budget authority to do so. So if we do that, we might have to amend the budget to get you that budget authority.
It is kind of nice having that sitting there as a cushion.
It is, and I think the intention, back when we were talking about closing that oil and gas fund, and Clayton helped me because you were involved in those discussions, I think it was just in case, knowing that the building for the courthouse is older, wanting to make sure we had the, I think maybe the elevator may have been a concern at that point.
Yes.
We've got some.
The boiler. Of course,
Was it the boiler? I can't
Well,
remember
no,
what
that
all.
was several years
But there
ago.
were several things on your guys' list that's why they had chosen to put it there. If those are no longer a concern, we can always look at reallocating.
But the elevator is one item, that,
Okay.
because it is ancient.
And I think that will qualify under the capital improvement
Yeah.
fund. Lisa, I may have to have you pull the statute that was originally established under, just so I can verify that for you, but I'm pretty sure I looked at that for Nita years back, that would qualify,
Okay.
so. Okay, other than that, no big surprises with any additional funds. We did not have any budget violations or any additional cash violations besides the one that I mentioned. So everything was looking pretty good on the accounting with it. Now, I do have some comments I'd like to go over with you, and that's in that loose leaf letter that you've got in there. So this has changed just a little bit as well. So normally in the past, you would get a governance letter and a management letter, but we've combined it all into one letter, okay? So I'm gonna jump around backwards a little bit because you're used to me going over management letter first. That's gonna be towards the back page, essentially. This is where we're gonna list out our significant deficiencies. So we do still have to cite and inform you guys, we do have a lack of segregation of duties within the county. We know that's there, you guys have controls in place to try to mitigate anything potentially happening. It's just not a foolproof system, so we have to disclose it to you. That there could be, some things could get through the cracks with the controls we have in place. But it's not financially feasible for the county to have enough personnel on hand to have proper segregation.
Yeah.
Correct. So then I have mainly just 4 comments to kind of go over. That starts on the second page and on to the third page of that letter. Down at the bottom is the first one, and it's mainly dealing with the fee offices. So when we work on our audit procedures, we get copies of the records from each fee office. We then take those records that they keep individually and tie it back to what the county treasurer's office has recorded within the general ledger. We ran into multiple departments that had small variances, nothing huge and concerning. They were to the point where we're waiving it, but that's usually not what we see from the county. I don't know where the communication dropped on it, but our recommendation is to go back and review our procedures of what we're doing, because typically what had happened in the past, county treasurer always issued, and I believe it was still occurring last year from my understanding, they would issue receipts with the daily work that they processed, gave it back. They would also at the month end give general ledger reports to each department that remitted in collections. That department needs to take responsibility as well to review those general ledger reports to their year-to-date numbers to make sure that, hey, maybe clerk's office got recorded in a register of deeds somehow, and make sure we get it in the right category. So just beef up the reconciliation process within each of those. So we did have small variances with like ambulance. That could be with insurance related too. So that's pretty common with EMS and health just because of their type of funding, sometimes insurance write-offs depending on how they're processing things, collection of when payments come in there. Did have a little bit of variance with county clerk as well. That was mainly with the boat permit, not boat permits, wildlife permits, and how those are recorded, could have been timing with it. Had some with sheriff and register of deeds. And then I think clerk of the court was off as well on that. So, like I said, nothing big, just something that we would recommend that the departments work on, trying to make sure they're reviewing it on their side, because if they're looking at their daily receipts and they agree with it, that's great. They're double checking it went in the correct spot, but they're not seeing if something else got posted to their fund that shouldn't be there.
And you talked to them all about that?
Yeah, I believe we did visit with each of them on that. I know I spoke personally with Lou at Register of Deeds. I don't know if we got a hold of Sheriff. Do you remember? Did you speak with
Rob?
Wanda, I believe so. but
Okay.
It was a little later on in the,
So we might just need to reiterate that to each of the departments, saying, hey, let's just work on those reconciliations. So, like I said, nothing big or major, it's just a formality that would probably help beef up those controls. So then my next area is dealing with taxes that we collect on another division. So essentially, I'm focusing in on the hospital. We had $452 left in cash in the hospital fund this year. We had remaining budget authority in that fund to disperse that, and it wasn't dispersed by year end. If we're levying money on behalf of another entity, we should really make sure we disperse it as long as we have budget authority to do so. A couple things could have came to why that wasn't dispersed. If daily work wasn't processed timely to where it wasn't in there at year end, that they didn't know to process it through the AP cycle, because if it wasn't processed through daily work, it would have been posted to the GL, they wouldn't have seen a cash balance there to process it. If vouchers weren't processed in the general ledger, because the way your system is, you process a voucher, but if the voucher isn't posted, it's not going to show up on all reports that they run. So it's just important that we look at our controls and procedures and have communication between clerk and treasurer's office on those types of things. So the main funds that we watch for on that would probably be with service for the elderly in the hospital, are the two, because they're tax collections, but they're processed on the distributions through AP, since we have a budget to follow rather than a distributable fund on that. So.
And we do have a note to check both those funds, but that is exactly what happened. Stuff wasn't posted timely enough for us to see that one.
So, all right, and then the next one is dealing with our bank reconciliations. And this one, me personally, I have a little bit more concern on that. Treasurer's office, we have processes cash, we're just responsible for all the tax roll reconciliations, cash reconciliations, things like that. Everything that you guys do is on cash basis, so the bank reconciliations are a very important step to the month-end close. December bank recs were not completed until February 11th and February 14th. So that's not real timely. ideally what you would want is to have bank statements come in within that first, maybe second week, depending on how quick you get those. And then we should be able to turn around and reconcile it within that week or within the next week. The longer we delay a bank reconciliation, the harder it is to reconcile. And then in addition to that, we also had a lot of items posted to items not in bank on the bank reconciliation. I know you guys probably don't look at the bank reconciliation each week. So the way they do it, within CIC, you have the banking side of CIC and you have the general ledger CIC side of it. So when they do the reconciliation, it's reconciling those two systems. So a lot of times we'll have things that are not in the banking side processed yet because daily work wasn't processed, or they're looking into reconciliations trying to identify where the funds came from, what fund it needs to go to, and it's not processed yet by the time they do the bank rec. So that kind of goes back to the processing of daily work. Let's make sure that we're staying on top of that and getting it processed in time, because it makes reconciling a lot easier. I do know within the current bank recs there was some cleanup with it, and I was kind of expecting that a little bit. But there were some items that they were going to look into because they couldn't figure out what the variance was creating from. So at some point, they may just have to pick a starting point, adjust through miscellaneous income expense. It was very minimal dollars, but it was still unidentifiable. At some point, when we're dealing with older bank recs, it's hard to go back and identify those if we're not done timely. So I would follow up with the treasurer's office to see, do we have a system in place at this point? Are we staying current on it? Things like that. I also recommend that we have more than one person trained to do bank reconciliations. I did learn during processes this year that we were working on, we only had one person that knew how to do bank recs and never cross-trained anybody within that office. So it's important to have more than one. And then it's important when you do cross-training that you allow the second person to do that full function on occasion so they stay current on those skills. And then you also have a different set of eyes working on it. So it helps kind of catch some things too. So might review those processes with that department and see what their plans are. That was communicated to the office. I visited with Mary. I believe it was her second to last day here. Then I did have follow-up conversations with Lisa at one point with you, not the other Lisa. So, because Lisa Milton, I don't think was on staff at that point.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one is dealing with the tax roll reconciliation. So, in the end, I ended up getting the tax roll reconciliation to reconcile. I did a lot more work than what typically I would do as an auditor. When I got that, the tax roll had a variance of $277,000 when it was presented to me. I started asking questions, wasn't getting anywhere, so I finally just started asking for reports and digging into it myself. In the end, it was correct. But I'm telling you this for the fact that it's important to have someone in that position, and I know you guys are limited, it is an elected position, but it's important to make sure we have the right training to gain that understanding and knowledge base to be able to understand the tax collection process, tax reconciliation, things like that. Because they should be able to dig in and answer these types of questions that I was asking as an auditor. What a lot of it came down to is processing old tax roll collections in the current year, and that's fine if they do that. It's just that they have to be able to identify it and address it as we go through. What I actually recommend a lot of times with the tax roll reconciliation, every time they do a distribution in that office, you're supposed to be tying out your distributions anyway, because you don't want to over distribute. So you're going to look at what your collections have been so far, we're going to calculate what our distributions would be, make sure that agrees. Well, if you're already doing a reconciliation for your distributions, that's half your tax roll reconciliation. Just do a tax roll reconciliation at that point. Then you know if you come up with issues, kind of like the bank roll reconciliations, you do it periodically, it's going to be easier to find the issues and unusual reconciling items. So. So that might be an area that maybe visit with the treasurer's office, because I think with the turnover that you guys have had, just make sure that they're getting the proper training, understanding, things of that sort in that office. And that's also an area that I would probably recommend maybe some cross-training. Probably gonna take a year to get that true understanding to be able to go ahead and do cross-training with it, but it's still always a good idea to have someone else knowledgeable to be able to do that, so. Okay. Any questions?
I don't think so.
Alright, well, I will get the management rep letter, to Lisa to print again, and then she'll have you guys sign that probably next week and get back with me. I can send it today, but
Okay.
we may not have time to print it and get it to
Okay,
them,
so
so.
I will.
Did we need to ask Melissa about where Rob was wanting to purchase?
I've talked to her about that, yes, so whenever you wanna, if you wanna go through budget stuff and then
Yep.
talk about that. Okay.
Okay. Alright, so I'll switch gears to the budget. And I didn't print you guys a copy because it's a very rough draft at this point, okay? So, apparently I've printed a lot of it. Okay, so let's start with the fire district first. I just want to check with you on it. So, what we have for the fire district right now, with what the department has requested, we're gonna levy $290,000, okay? In the past, we levied $225,000, so we're gonna be looking at doing an increase on that. I do apologize, I did not bring my R&R calculation on that one. Lisa, do you happen to have that valuation on that, so it'll have the R&R on it?
Let me look at, like my budget, my estimate sheet.
Yeah,
I'll get that.
so we will be exceeding the R&R on that, and I just wanted to make sure that that's what your wishes are if you're wanting to cut that. Essentially what we're looking at, and for the cause of that, our unencumbered cash did decrease in the current year. We went from 47,000 down to 30,000, so we used a little bit of our cash reserves in that particular fund. And then we will look at what we budgeted for the current year. We may be a little bit up. We have 80,000 budgeted for personal services. We only spent 68,000 last year, but with their department, it's kind of unknown because you don't know how often they're going to get called out and things like that. So you've always had a cushion in there. Commodities, I have it at 73,000 for 22 is where we budgeted. They're asking for 100,000 this year just because of the uncertainty on where things are going to be for fuel and materials, things of that sort. I think that included some additional fire equipment, safety
Yeah.
gear, things like that. They spent 76,000 this year in that category. We're looking at contractual, we budgeted 67.5 in 22, we're looking at 84,000 this year. We only spent 40,000 this year. So I don't know with our contractual where that increase is coming from, if you guys spoke with them about that, if there's any wiggle room that you want to decrease that potentially, or if you're okay with this.
I don't
The
remember him talking about that.
The proposed budget was 40,000 for contractual.
No, I have 84,100.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
So yours goes line by line. So essentially, this area here, this is your personal service. Your commodities are gonna go from here, clear down to here, and then your contractual is gonna be from here down to here. So when we look at commodities, you've got 40,000 here, 6,500 for building repairs. Let's see, 6,500 for dues and subscriptions, 5,000 for education, 13 for insurance, and that's where a good chunk of that is, because we were at 10 and went to 13. And then utilities are bumped up.
Because we're adding a Maxville station.
Okay.
And then, and
So
like,
as long as we're good with that, just making sure that we know.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there on the,
So we're jumping it, we're essentially budgeting almost double
You have
from what we
personal
spent
services
in
there.
21, so I just wanna make sure you
General
guys,
services.
that's
Yeah.
what you were wanting.
Yep.
And then capital outlay, we have $40,000 budgeted in that, and I think that was for just other equipment down here.
Yeah.
Um,
We have some equipment like our air bottles and stuff like that and bunker gear that we've kind of got him on a schedule to where he replaces it. And
Just
so
so
I-
it stays current and,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have to
Yep.
do bottles this year and gear next year, so I think he was planning a little ahead.
Okay,
But I think we just kind of put the budget forward like that because he said we could cut that back a little bit if we had to,
Mhm.
but he would rather get ahead of the curve.
yeah, and what I recommend, if you're okay with that, and I'll calculate the R&R and get that emailed out to you, so you guys can look at it. Yeah, so your R&R is, 2.72 mils, our valuation is 80, so we're gonna get 82923. So we're not quite at 3 mils, but we are exceeding. I'll have to double check my calculation on that. I'm doing that in my head. We're gonna get 82,923 for every mil we're levying, so
82.9 what?
82,923, and right now we are pulling out 290,000.
Okay.
So that'll calculate out our mills, what that percentage calculates out. So that's the mills that we're currently levying. Last year, we levied at 3.19 mils. Your R&R decreased because our valuations increased. In the end, I'm gonna probably recommend you do an R&R hearing regardless, just so you lock it in. Just because of the times, you're probably gonna have some valuations change between now and then. If we don't do an R&R, we're not locking in the tax dollars that we're saying we're gonna operate with, and we have a chance of reducing what the county's gonna receive, so then you're gonna have to do last minute cuts somewhere. And that might be difficult with the times, not knowing what fuel and equipment and things like that are gonna look like for you. I'm not saying that we have to do a large R&R increase, but maybe go over it 0.01, so we can say, hey, we
So at
are
least it's
exceeding it,
There.
and get us to that point, so. But yeah, with the fire district, just wanted to make sure on that, and then we had a $5,000 transfer to special fire equipment. If we come in under on that, that's something that I would probably, if we're looking at some bigger equipment improvements, when you get to the end of the year, even here in 22, look at that. If we have budget room within that fund, and we wanna set money aside for some equipment and things like that, increase that transfer over. Just because you don't have anything encumbered this year right now, you can do approval within commission minutes to do an increased transfer from your budget, okay? As long as we have budget authority in total, we're okay to do that. So maybe if you have 10,000 surplus here, move that over to your special equipment, you've got that set aside, because then it doesn't become cash reserves to where it looks like we're trying to levy.
Okay.
So you know you have that set aside for it.
Because if they just keep it in cash, then you can't hardly spend that cash without going over your next year's budget.
Correct, because we're gonna have that cash come back over here for available use. So then it's going to show that we do not need those funds, so then we're gonna use the reserve within our spending and not levy enough dollars to prepare for those future equipment needs. That's why we have those equipment reserves funds set up, so you can set it aside, pull it out of that calculation, and truly have essentially a savings account, is the way I look at it, set aside to spend for those larger needs, so.
It's 290,175
Mhm.
divided by 82,923.
Yep.
That's 3.499
Oh.
mils.
I'm not
So
calculating that.
right at 3.5
So
mils,
yeah,
basically.
we're at 3.5 compared to 3.019. So we're increasing half a mil essentially at that point. So if you guys are okay with that, that's not that big of a deal, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that jump, because usually you guys don't have jumps like that.
How did his encumbered cash come from last year to this year?
So it was 47,131 and it ended at 30,109.
Okay, so he is spending this, he's not carrying much cash over.
Right, he actually ended up using some of it.
Mhm.
And if we go to the audit report, fire districts on page 21. point. It'll go line by line, so like personal services, we budgeted 65,000, but he spent 68. Probably had some extra calls that we went out on overtime or something of that sort. Contractual, we were over on that line, 76,000 to 73.5. So I think that's part of the reason why he bumped up to 100 there. Commodities, we were under budget 26,000 within that particular area, and capital outlay, we were under by 5,200. But see, here is an example of the transfers out. We budgeted 5, we transferred 30,000 out to the reserve. So that's what I was talking about there. So he did move some of that cash over. So even though we're showing a $10,000 drop here, we moved 30,000 out to the reserves. And if we look at the reserve, we had 30,000 come in, but we had 198,000 go out. So our reserves dropped from 319 to 151.
That would be the fire building.
Yeah, we built a new fire station at Maxwell.
Maxwell.
Correct. So, but because you do those transfers, that's why you had the cash available to do that, didn't have to do a lease purchase. So,
Okay.
things to keep in mind on that as you're going through these. So if you guys are good on there, I'll go ahead and get a good draft to Lisa for that, so that she can get that into your boxes to look at. For the actual county budget, goodness gracious, I didn't print everything. When we go to look at our draft right now, and I'm waiting on some final numbers for a few departments. For those departments, I'm just using what we had budgeted last year. So that was with employee benefits, courthouse general,
Infotech and,
yes.
yeah, and janitor.
Janitor.
But there shouldn't be huge
So-
variations in those.
No, we're gonna have some swings, because Lisa asked me to change how we're budgeting for telephone expense. I'm gonna pull telephone out of each department line, so those aren't gonna quite match up with what you guys provided to me initially. I'll go through, pull those out, add all of that to county general. She said that that would be easier for her to code it all into one spot than each individual department with the way they're billing it out.
And you've got to think about, we do have to add in for Lisa Milton for like our employee benefits.
Yes.
Some of that stuff.
Well, and then where salary's coming from, because I don't think I saw that increase
It's
with the
gonna be
numbers I
coming
got
out
for
of
the
their general.
treasurer's office, so.
Yeah,
Okay, so when I'm looking at the draft, your R&R is 56.525 mils for the year, okay? Right now, I'm at 59.674, and we have some increases to add. Now, with that, I do have, I believe, let me double check, some transfers built in, because I still have the transfers that we did last year that I built in, so I can back off on those. Because usually we just build in the transfers where we have budget room to where you guys want to be for the tax levy. So I am including 150,000 to special capital improvement, no, excuse me, I'm on the wrong line. 150,000 to equipment reserve, and then 175,000 to special capital improvement in that. So that's quite a bit that's adding that up. And if we take those out, we're gonna be closer back down to the 56. The other part that's causing that to jump is within the numbers that I got for road and bridge. So we have an additional 200,000 of expenses built in within capital outlay for road and bridge. Is that something that we plan on spending this year, or is that something that we're looking at setting money aside for future equipment?
It's more for future equipment,
Yeah.
wouldn't you think?
yeah.
So,
I guess we're seeing that our equipment is getting dated.
okay,
and The equipment's becoming more and more expensive.
okay.
So
I
we're
think
just
like-
trying to
So
get ahead.
what we're gonna do with that, we're not gonna call that capital outlay, we're gonna call that a transfer to the special machinery fund
Mhm.
on that. So
Is that
then,
right? Is that what we're thinking?
okay,
Yeah.
so we're gonna move that down to special machinery fund, and you might let him know that as to why his budget's changing as
Okay.
well. Just for the fact that that'll remind us, hey, we need to do year-end transfers. We can leave it at capital outlay, but again, if we don't do that year-end transfer, we're just leaving that in cash reserves. We're not setting that aside, and we're gonna continue to rely on that cash at that going forward. So we wanna look at year-end, try to transfer those funds out, set it aside, not out of the operating budget on that. So, now, when you're doing that, are you looking at trading in equipment, or is it just gonna have to be a flat replacement?
Probably for trading in equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. What I would recommend, have him go through, do you have like a listing of all of his equipment already? Like the number of hours machinery is on, how long we think it's gonna last, things like that? And how
Yeah.
soon we're gonna have to replace
He
it?
brings that into us every year, doesn't he?
Yeah.
See if we can get that to know, kind of know. I like to look at it 5 years, 10 years out on some of that, if we know we're gonna have to do a substantial amount of equipment. Because we don't wanna just look at the 1 year. We wanna look out to make sure that, hey, let's even this out. Let's not make a huge swing in 1 year if we can account for it going forward. So we might wanna put a schedule together to kind of line that out, to see how much funds we truly need to make sure we have available. And I can kind of project on what you have within special machinery to make sure we have enough on that.
Okay.
So we have one road grader that's in question now.
Yeah.
And he was wanting to replace a dump truck this year, and they went up so much, we just told him to hold
Okay.
off.
Okay, so yeah, if we can get that, let me see the numbers, and if he's got estimated amounts, or I know estimates don't do us really much good now, because what's priced today is 3 times tomorrow right now. But if we can get some dollar amounts that we think would be reasonable prices at this current market, we can kind of play that in to see what our future cash needs are gonna be at that point, just to make sure that we line you up to where you wanna be. And we may not accomplish it all in one budget. We may just have to put over what we can and then get you there, but if we keep that in mind from year to year on what our future needs are, it'll be a lot easier going forward, so, okay? So yeah, if he's got a schedule like that, get Felicia and she can get it over to me and
Yeah.
I don't know
we'll
if he's
kind of
got,
project those out.
we'd have to ask him if he's got a projection, what he's wanting to replace, in order over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, 'cause
But he
you-
ought to be able to put some like.
Because you mentioned the graders in question now, is that something that's gonna have to be replaced within the next 2 years?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
So.
if we can find a bargain.
When we're looking at graders, you're probably looking, well, used to be 800,000 plus for a grader, I'm sure it's more than that now.
No,
That would be for,
They're
Yeah,
about
these ones,
400.
yeah, these ones that we're buying are 280 to 380.
is that used price, new price?
New price.
New
Yeah.
price, okay, and then you'll get a trade value with that to
Yeah.
reduce it, okay.
Yeah.
So,
It seems like
you
around
might be better off,
200,000
the
a year.
last,
He could
last couple
easily
I've
burn
worked with was
200,000 a
in
year.
800,000 range,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
They got the super duper model.
It was also with the county that does all of the township roads. That they don't
Yes,
have
we do
township-
too.
Yeah,
I
they
know.
probably get the big graders with the front wheel assists and
Yeah.
everything else.
Probably.
Yeah.
So, okay, just making sure we're looking at that. So I guess really what I need from you guys, just so I know where I can go through and put my recommendations together, Lisa will give me those numbers hopefully this week. We'll get this to you to look at next week, 'cause we're gonna have to get this lined up. and
So it
finished
basically
pretty
comes
soon.
down to how much transfers we build in.
Transfers we build in and where your comfort level is on exceeding the R&R, and give me guidelines of where you wanna be. Like,
Yeah.
are we okay with an increase? Are we wanting to try to minimize that and stay within reason of the R&R? I'm only going over slightly on that. What are your thoughts?
On the first 2 transfers that you went through before we
Mhm.
got to Road and Bridge, what were those transfers in?
So it is 150,000 to equipment reserve and 175 to special capital outlay. You guys didn't actually make transfers of those last year. We did 90,000 to equipment reserve, but nothing to special capital improvement because you have such a big reserve.
And that is on Road and Bridge
That is within general fund.
within general.
Within general fund. And that was just there to maintain your reserves. You guys didn't actually end up making those larger transfers. Those are the same transfer amounts that we had built into the budget the previous year. So I just started.
It sounds like you're at least recommending that we do a R&R of some sort, even if it's just a little bit.
I would. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of notifications going out to the public. But with the way it's currently written, if valuations do drop between now and November, your amount that you're levying will be reduced. And that's gonna make your budget much tighter. So, in an entity the size of the county, it's probably in the best interest because that's where you guys are gonna have such a larger valuation, even a slight drop, we're talking $100,000 gone.
Yeah.
Depending on what
Yeah.
the fluctuation in valuation is. and think about how much of your value comes from oil and gas. If we have a change in that between now and November and something changes there, we could be looking at a decrease and having to come up with some cuts throughout the process.
Then you never know what they're gonna set the price
So,
of.
now, when I'm dealing with, because I also work a lot in cemeteries, townships, when I'm working with them, their valuations aren't as high. So those are ones that I'm like, okay, we have cash reserves. If we look at what your valuation may drop and the impact on it, a lot of times we're only talking $500,000. That's not gonna make or break them. So there, I may not recommend that we do R&Rs. The cemeteries that get attached to the county's budget, they will not do an R&R unless they go out and publish on their own. That was something that we decided to do last year because it gets too complicated to do county's R&R, cemetery R&R all at the same time within the same hearing.
Yeah.
So
Is Barton County doing R&R?
I don't know. I don't do their budget.
Oh, okay.
So how much of an increase, I know you went over that, are we gonna have from last year's budget to this year's budget?
So what I've got right now, and keep in mind, I still have those transfers built in here, so I've got.
With the transfers, it's 6.3% increase,
Yeah,
6.3.
we're looking, yeah, we're going from
or from 56.525 to 59.
correct, so that's for your mill rate. Keep in mind, your mill rate last year was 62.86,
Yeah,
because the valuations were much lower.
but since value went up, mills went down.
Correct, so if we look at what taxes levied are, last year we're at 5.548 million, right now I'm at 5.86.
5.86.
So essentially we're up 300,000
Mm-hmm.
right now. But I've also got 325,000 here in transfers that I went ahead and put in, just because we did it last year, that I can easily pull back out.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that increase. So if we don't want to add budget for any transfers, we're gonna be at that level. So I just need kind of direction of where you want to end up. If we're okay with a little bit of increase in tax dollars and having a reduced mill rate, if we're wanting our mill rate to be approximately the same, which would allow for more tax dollars this year because of the valuation. Because then I can go through, fine tune it, give you guys recommendations on where you want to look at and make final decisions at that point.
But we
What
have-
departments have done with you already.
On those transfers there into the general fund,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't been depleting that fund's been basically growing, hasn't it?
Correct.
So if we cut those transfers in half, we'd probably be able to maintain that fund?
Then you'd be down to about a 3% increase, correct?
I was wondering about doing away with those, leaving the fire department where it's at, to where he can get.
Well, it makes no
more-
sense for us to have him do his schedule out year to year and then cut his budget to where he can't do his schedule.
And I felt when we talked to him, I thought that he was saying he was trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit to where he wouldn't have to make a huge jump next year.
Right.
So,
Because we're rotating in, we've been in some years that weren't as bad, but we're rotating into a period of more expense as far as his gear goes.
Right.
And we've always held the line pretty good, so
Yeah.
we've done that for so long.
Yeah.
I don't mind
And
doing.
last year we dropped, we went from 63.583 down to 62.862 mils, so we dropped the mills. That was also a time where our assessed value did go up. We were at 83.7 million value in 21, 22 it was 88.4 million. Now we're up to 98.2 million. It took a pretty big jump this year.
Mm-hmm. That's mainly from oil and gas, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know that that was all from oil and gas. I don't know that I'm gonna have that
We're
breakdown.
actually, compared to some other counties that I've seen their increase amounts, we're kind of on the lower end.
Really?
Mhm.
So what do you guys think?
Then
Should
you
we
transfer some out and,
take some of the transfers out into the general,
yeah,
try to leave a little bit in there?
yes.
Okay,
I mean, I don't mind a little increase, I just don't want to do a $300,000 increase.
Yeah.
And Road and Bridge several years ago, when our oil evaluation went down, they came
They
in
took
and
a
took
major
a
hit.
major cut. And we've never gone back up, so our machinery has been
Right,
hurting a little bit.
right.
As far as what we've been putting back in
Yeah.
the special machinery, we kind of feel like we're behind the 8 ball. on
So
what's
Melissa, you said
coming.
that was 325,000?
Yeah, cause I have 150 to equipment reserve and 175 to special capital improvement. And if you remember, special capital improvement, it has 1.2 million, 1.3, 1.2 million of cash sitting in it right now. So as long as you think that's going to be substantial enough to cover any
And that was our
needs
oil-
for the
oil
courthouse or county buildings or construction of new buildings of any sort,
It sounds
you'd
like,
be okay, and
That
then
was
I would
basically-
recommend we cut out the 175,000 to special capital improvement first, and then look at the equipment needs for the county. What, do we have kind of an idea of what just general departments are going to need for equipment going forward?
well, we've kind of got fire figured out, so we
Yeah.
don't really need
Yeah.
to
Say
talk
road
about
and
it.
bridge
but
and.
Road and bridge and,
And the courthouse.
Road and Bridge.
yeah, noxious weeds fine for a while.
If we, with the permitting and stuff, if we move the landfill, it's gonna start going through the state. What budget, where can we take that money out of?
Where would that come out
Say that again.
We're
of? New
thinking,
landfill?
we're gonna have to change our location of our landfill. We're
Okay.
thinking about moving out here to ground the county already has. But as far as starting with the state, as far as getting the soil samples and everything done, it's probably gonna be 125,000.
So we got two options with that. We can look at what we've got in solid waste within the landfill and use up reserves within it. We do not have a post-closure closure fund, so that's going to end up coming out of, your capital improvement fund probably.
On general. Okay. That's kind of what we
No,
thought.
not on general, your capital improvement fund.
Oh, capital.
For establishing a new landfill. That would,
Okay.
that would qualify out of that fund, I
Mhm.
believe.
Okay.
And then at one point, whatever was basically from the oil depreciation
Yeah,
fund.
it's 1.2 million.
Completion.
And that's
Yeah.
that fund there, so that would
Yes.
be coming out of that fund.
Yeah, 1.2 million is what you've got.
And we'd still have a really good sized cushion.
And then we could start building that fund back up.
Yeah.
We're just we have like
You've got-
a year out there at our old landfill, and we're out of room.
Oh, really?
And
Okay,
we've been in the process of trying to find ground,
okay,
so. But
okay.
It sounds like the taxpayer's gonna get an R&R notification regardless of what we do budget-wise, just.
Just from listening
just
to
based
what
on-
the state gave us guidance with the budget, education course, I would recommend that. Just because of the way that the valuations could go.
Mhm. And they'll get this year's a mailer, right?
Yep, this year's at Miller, so Lisa's office will incur some,
Yep.
probably gotten some notifications
And have
already.
you,
Yeah,
have
I've
you
already
built
got
some of
that
that into
started.
your,
Nita had built some in to this year's, so I've got money there and we'll continue to do that, just so we have that there.
and refresh me on that, does the state reimburse us for part of that mailing?
The
or
state, they're saying that we are to be reimbursed. We're supposed to see our
We
money
pay
by
for
the
it
end
and
of
then
the
we
year.
turn it in?
Yes, and then I think they're gonna do that for what, the next 2 years maybe, and
I
then they're
think
gonna
it's 2
bill,
years and then it's supposed to go
they'll
back
bill
out
the
to those
entities,
entities.
yeah. That's the plan.
So.
Maybe in the next 2 years they'll figure out a way to get rid of
Well,
this.
that's what I'm
Yes.
hoping. I was
Yes.
hoping they were gonna correct it before we had to do
Yes,
the
to do
mailers this
this.
year.
And then the tax laws would be rewritten and
So, but yeah, that, so when they get that notification, essentially what it's gonna look like, it's gonna say, if they were at the R&R, here's where your estimated tax would have been. If they're exceeding the R&R, and it'll say what the the amount exceeded is, and it'll calculate the new tax on that. So it's gonna almost look like a tax statement that they're getting, but it's gonna have a comparison of saying, this is where the R&R was, this is where we're projecting it to be. Just because we put it at that point when we send out the mailers, doesn't mean that we have to stick with that R&R. We can back off, can't increase it from there, but we can still back off on it. Kinda like what we do when we publish the budget. We can reduce it all we want at that point from publication, but if we wanna increase, we'd start over and republish.
Yeah.
So,
Now, has the CPI gone away
yes,
in regards to the tax?
yes.
So
Yeah,
now it's R&R.
it all focuses on the R&R. And essentially what the R&R does, it doesn't allow for an inflation adjustment. It essentially looks at what we levied last year for our final tax levy, looks at what our estimated valuation is, and it calculates what your new tax rate is to get the same dollars you got last year. So you don't even get an adjustment for inflation. So ideally, in order to adjust, especially with times that we're dealing with now, chances are it's harder to cut, right? Especially since we've ran a fairly tight budget for year after year. You guys have always been fairly conservative on trying to limit any increases. We only do that when we absolutely have to, and I think I'd have to go back and look at history when we had the debt for the no fund warrants. Once that was paid off, we backed off quite a bit on what we were levying on that. So you're at a time where we're either gonna have to look to cut services, because you're either gonna have to look to cut positions, because payroll's your number one expense, and equipment's your second expense. I might have those actually flipped when you count in the cost of road and bridge equipment. So those are probably two areas that you really don't wanna cut, but that's up to you guys. So you're looking at a time where you need to go over the R&R just to account for inflation, essentially.
And the exceptions of the fire department, health, and police have gone away, as well as the CPI.
That is correct. That is correct.
So we're looking at being right at 58 mils, basically, if we take those transfers about in half.
Yep,
Current budget, we're at 59.674, 56.525 is revenue neutral. So we'd be right at 58, right around like a 3.1% increase.
on the rate, yes.
Yes.
Which overall, this,
That may not be a 3.1% on the
On
actual
dollar.
tax. I'd
Yeah.
have to calculate, because that
Yeah.
calculation would work out quite a bit different.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
So-
mill.
And I can run the effects for you on what that looks like for individual taxpayers. I can base upon what's the average value of a home around here.
Yeah, I think that our average taxpayer in Stafford County has experienced a heck of a lot more than a 3.1% increase in their day-to-day lives. And if our taxpayers are expecting the same services from the county, you know, aside from what you just said, cutting employees or equipment, I don't see how you don't go up some in an inflationary period.
Yeah, I don't wanna start cutting.
Well, you're just kicking the ball down the road.
Yeah,
And
you
then,
end up getting behind them.
well,
you
and
can't get
actually
caught up.
58, MLW 58 is pretty conservative compared to others. other
We've
counties.
had years where we were up to 69, I think. If I can go back and look at history, when we were levying for no fund.
when value was
Yeah.
way down.
I think values were up at that point.
Really?
I'd have to go back and look. We had the no fund warrants for the hospitals on the books at that time,
Yeah.
making those bond payments.
Okay.
So we had to levy quite a bit for those debt payments back then.
And the only debt we have will be an ambulance, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I do have that information. Find that page.
Did that seem okay, the choice that we selected?
Yeah, that, and I told her as long as, because I went through the different scenarios with her, found some errors that they had in their numbers and had to go back to them. But, I think you'll be fine with that, because I told her you could probably do the 30,000 or 60,000 down payment as long as you maintained your payments within a certain range. So I think you're gonna be fine with that, as long as you're okay with that, fund continuing to levy that range. Now, that is one fund I probably should go over with you, because right now, I am taking a drop in where we're sitting on that fund. So, 2021, that was our rough year. That was the year that we started with, we overspent in that fund. We were down negative 618, just with the way the numbers fell. We ended the year with $87,000 of cash in there, unencumbered, okay? I am still projecting that they're gonna spend, and we might be a little tight on this budget. I have a feeling personal services might be a little understated. We have $235,000 budgeted. We spent $239 last year. I bumped up her request this year, she was at 240. I annualized what she spent so far in personal services through May. We were gonna be over budget with using the 240, so I did bump that up to 243 just to give a little bit of cushion there, for a couple of extra thousand. We might be tight on the contractual, knowing where prices are going. She spent 42,693 last year. She's at 40,235 this year. So, and we have the capital outlay, we budgeted 30,000. That was for the ambulance payment. So we're fine with that down payment because that was a 30,000 down payment that you guys approved, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have payments going to be 46,621 in the future.
Yep.
So I have that budgeted for this year for capital outlay. She does not have anything else budgeted for capital outlay within her fund. We do have a $60,000 transfer that we budgeted in '22 to go to the reserve fund. We don't have a reserve transfer currently built in. Is that something that we want to look at for that department too, to build up a reserve slowly? I'm not saying we need to bump it up and do 60,000 every year. You know, we could put a $5,000 transfer in, just slowly put some money aside with the idea saying, hey, this is set aside for when we need a new ambulance or one of those high dollar cots that they end up having to purchase every so often.
Yeah.
And continue to do that and make sure we're doing those transfers year after year.
I think that'd be good.
So.
Yeah, if you did 5,000, you'd have 35 in there when we need to buy a new ambulance.
Yep.
And then that would cover
Mhm.
you down. Or 40, yeah, it depends on.
So maybe look at reducing the reduce the transfers in general, look at what we could do for transfer and ambulance then, okay? Because that was the one that we were taking a big drop. Now, we bumped it up quite a bit because we needed to recoup for having negative cash and spending that fund down to zero. We levied $286,000 in '22 for that fund. With the numbers that I've got right now, I'm only levying 168. So we're taking that back down. But, and we levied 281 the year in
Mhm.
'21 as
So
well.
if we're building a
to
little
make that
transfer, we'll be up in the 170s somewhere.
Mhm.
Okay.
To hopefully make sure we maintain a cash reserve for it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess if we're wanting to make changes on any of the deals, now would be the time to pay.
Mhm.
On the Historical Society, I think they're wanting a $2,000 increase. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're already giving them that, and they want this.
Mm-hmm.
I think they ought
Yeah,
to be
so
able,
Historical Society, I'm at 30,000.
yeah, I'd be ready to drop, keep that at 28 where they've been.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Is there any other budgets you want to look at?
Any other departments you guys have concerns with, or reserve funds that we need to look at? I mean, you have reserve funds for appraiser and health department, noxious weed department has its capital outlay fund. It's currently sitting with 38,000 in it. I'm not sure what type of equipment we need to have within that particular department. If we need to look at budgeting transfers into that, we currently do not have any budgeted within that fund for the request we got from the department. They did transfer 5,000 in this year. And just because we don't budget a transfer, if you have reserves, like I said, you can still go and approve your transfers and add that in, so. Budget is just a guideline.
On the Sunflower Diversified, did they just stay the same as the money that they asked for, or did they ask for more?
So,
I believe this thing
is that
is-
mental health or is that intellectual disability? Which one is that? Cause I've got one that went from 7,000 to 9,000.
That's the guy that comes up out of, for like the adult mental health.
Out of Garden City.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he always
That's,
wants an
Golden Belt.
increase,
Um,
and we never give it to him.
Oh, intellectual disability, we budgeted 45,000 last year and that, the request I received was 60,832.
Those are ones we need to look at.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, might take a look at those, let me know what you wanna do with them.
Because this is our first look.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably be 2 or 3 more looks.
Right. We just need to make sure we get things wrapped up by July 20th,
Right.
because we have to have that notification in her office to start those
Mhm.
processes. Because we're gonna have to lock in what our max R&R would be. We can drop it from there, we just can't exceed it, so we can still tweak
Do
it
you
out.
guys want to take our stuff home, look at it this next week, and then have a short workshop after next week or something?
And what I'll do, I'll go make these revisions, I'll send you a draft so you can kind of see that as you're working on that
Yeah,
at home.
yeah,
I'll try to get that to you by the end of the day today, if not, I'll get it to you tomorrow, for sure. Because it won't take me too long to get through that. Then you can kind of look at where you're at, and then go through your additional cuts at that point.
okay.
And then I might have some notes and recommendations for you guys to look for later.
Okay,
Okay?
Sounds good.
thank you.
You didn't say
Appreciate it.
How come you didn't say anything?
I'm still a little learning curve.
Oh,
So will you
Don't
start,
scare her off.
I'm trying to make it feel comfortable.
so are you getting to where, I mean, you'll start doing the county audits and stuff?
I've been helping with audits, they're still slowly putting me through the delivery process.
Let's say, Delaney actually did the majority of your audit work
Yeah,
for me.
she worked with us this year.
Good.
So, she does the work I review,
There you go.
or Danielle will review. So. Alright, guys, well, if you, when you do your budget workshop, if you need to call me, just holler at me. If you need me to come down, I'm more than happy to do that too. We'll just have to kind of schedule that out, so, depending on the timing of when you meet, so.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you, guys. How's it going?
Going.
We're ready for you.
Yes, Counselor?
I think Rob needs an executive session and I need 2 minutes. And then I gotta run over and do a Zoom hearing at the courthouse, so.
Let's,
Non-elected personnel, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
you wanna do them first, or?
Oh, he's been waiting for a while.
I just don't know how long they're gonna take.
Go ahead.
I don't wanna
No.
crimp your style.
5 minutes?
Yep.
Non-elected or attorney-client? I make a motion that we go into executive session for 5 minutes to discuss non-elected personnel, including the sheriff, county attorney, Lisa, and the commissioners.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Tracy, just for you guys to look.
Looks good to me.
Good.
Good.
Make a motion, we increase Chrissy Green from range 5, step 3 to range 5, step 4, effective July 1 of 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Isn't that easy?
You waited around just for a minute, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, crack the whip on it. Hurry up.
Do you guys need an executive session or anything?
Yes, please.
How long would you like?
10 minutes is fine.
Okay. Non-elected personnel. Make a motion that we go into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss non-elected personnel, including Lisa, Vanessa, the commissioners, and Lisa.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we adopt the minutes of June 22nd.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. So we're all going to take our budget stuff home this week
Yes.
and take a look at
Pick
it.
through it and then maybe have a short. Do we have to advertise that we're doing a budget workshop after, or
No,
No, we just do it during the meeting, don't we?
Do it
Do we
You
have another?
can, or you can
just do a workshop
do a
after the meeting.
workshop. Yeah,
yeah?
that's fine.
You know, and that, or if we increase the road department like what Phil was wanting, that kind of covers the cut that he took a couple years ago. But that just, kind of covers the equipment problem. If this oil price and road oil stays up, I mean, we're basically able to do half the road overlay. So at some point, are we gonna have to increase to where we can get back to doing the same? Because I mean, I think if we let our roads start going to pot, it's going to cost a lot more to bring them back up into good shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so, Todd. I did some calling around and investigative work on our township work. And, you know, Phil kind of thought that we were making some money and that we would have to account, if we were to not do township work anymore, we would have to account for that in his budget. I think, what are we charging right now? Do you remember?
100.
I didn't have any current bills for 22.
Well, did we go to 95 an hour?
I thought we
I
went.
thought we went up to 100.
Maybe 100.
I figured it on 100, so I called Jay Wade and I got some figures on the depreciation on a grader. Say we bought a new grader today and we used it for, we run about 1,000 hours a year in the townships, between the two townships. We used it for 5 years and then we sold it in 5 years with a 5,000 hours on it. It's gonna bring a shade less than half of what we paid for it. So I got it figured at about $37.50 an hour in depreciation on your grader. And, you know, with our employee plus employee benefits, everything we have into an employee, I figured we had around 30 bucks an hour, maybe a shade bit more. We'll say 32 bucks an hour for an operator.
Okay.
And right now, you know, with $5 diesel, I would say we have between $15 and $20 an hour in diesel burn. So we'll just say $17 an hour in diesel burn. And then repairs and maintenance, I'd say 15 bucks an hour, 10 bucks an hour.
Yeah.
So that's 27 plus 32 plus 37.50 is $96.50 an hour in what we have in running a grader.
Yeah.
And if we're charging 100, we're basically, I mean, I don't know that you should be making a huge profit because then you're just trading tax dollars and you're profiting. You know, then Rose Valley's subsidizing the county, but we're not making a bunch of money. Like, you see what I'm saying? We're not, if we quit doing townships,
We're still losing money because their clock starts when they drop the blade in the township. You're not taking into effect the hour it takes for the guys to leave here, get down there,
yeah.
and that's, doesn't matter, it's depreciation on the grader is the same whether you're driving down the road or you're grading roads.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're not making money.
No. So that's what I wanted to do. I did that this last week to just make sure from our end of things, whether or not, because we're doing budgeting decisions for Phil, whether or not we're actually turning a $20, $30, $40 an hour profit. That's not the case. We're breaking even or losing money doing it.
Yep.
So I think at the very least, we need to look at another increase. But I would like to talk to the township board members and let them know. Because at some point, you know, I looked at it from their point of view on the bills, and it makes absolutely 0 sense for us to be grading the roads. If they would just buy their own grader and have their own guy. You know, we're, the last 3 years in a row, we've graded on average about 440 hours in Rose Valley Township. So 440 hours, and say you pay an operator, you pay him 30 bucks an hour, that's 13,200 in labor costs.
Yeah.
They're basically giving us their whole budget of around 100,000 a year. Now, I understand there's more than just grading, but I don't see how you couldn't pay, you know, somebody 30, 40,000 a year.
Yeah,
Make
well,
your grader payment, make your tractor payment and mower payment.
they all say that they can't find anybody to run a grader, but they're all only wanting to pay $13 an hour. So they need to get realistic on their hourly wage, yeah.
So what I'm looking at it from their point of view, that I don't know that they're getting a great value. Because the taxpayers aren't getting a great value because last year in 2021, we graded the roads on July 8th and 9th. And then we did not grade the roads again in Rose Valley until September 8th and 9th. So we went 60 days through irrigation season and harvest that we did not grade the roads in Rose Valley.
Yeah.
So the taxpayers got cheated because we're busy doing overlaying. And it doesn't make sense for them. I'm not sure that it makes sense for us, but I don't want to blindside anybody by making a knee-jerk.
And that 60 days is never gonna go away because that's when we're overloading.
No.
And it's our responsibility to take care of our county roads and do their secondary. So there's always gonna be a 60-day gap in the summer.
Yeah. And 60 days is too long on those roads.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you need to get across them every couple of weeks.
If they would've been smart, they would've kept their graders, kept a little bit of their money back, and then hired somebody to kind of go in there and supplement grade a little bit. But where they've sold their graders and just totally relying on us, and then complaining when we don't get down there every other week.
Or right after a rain.
Yeah. So,
So yeah, I'm not ready to do anything at this point. I want to talk to the township board members and go over it with them and see what we can do, but at the end of the day, we're not making any money doing it. So if we weren't to do it, we're not gonna have to budget in any extra.
okay.
Just listen what that was about.
I would like, when we get ready to adjourn, I'd like to do a 5-minute executive session, and then we'll adjourn with no
No
action after
action.
that.
I'm
Yeah.
ready.
I make a motion, we accept the tax roll corrections.
Second?
No, we can't do it till next week. I'm already starting to get carpal tunnel.
This is just a
We
mission.
have an emotion this second.
Just put a
For
T
tax
on
roll.
there and be done with it.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. I move that we go into executive session and adjourn with no action after that
For 5 minutes.
for 5 minutes.
Second.
Pardon? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Sorry.